What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap video, and today I want to talk about deck building in Marvel Snap because I think deck building is one of the most important things to learn in not only Marvel Snap but any card game really. So I played a ton of card games in the past, so I really have a lot of experience under my belt, and I have been making my own decks for the most part in Marvel Snap. Sometimes I'll see a list that other people post on either YouTube or Twitter, try it out for myself and be like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool, this is fun. Maybe make a couple adjustments to it to make it my own, kind of make it unique. But today I want to give you some tips on how to build decks on your own and really make decks feel unique and make them your own, because if you want, you could just copy decks off of Marvel Snap Zone, Stop That Fan, whatever, and try and reach infinite with those decks. But I really think it feels more rewarding when you rank up with your own decks. I made my own wacky, weird deck, Sandman Ronin Zero deck that I climbed to infinite with last season. It's a very weird deck, but it is very fun. If you're interested in that deck, I'll put a link to it in the description down below. You can check that out. But I think it is very important to learn how to build decks, the process behind it. So I think that'll make you not only a better deck builder within the game, but I think it'll also improve your gameplay as well, since you will understand why we choose these cards and what their purpose serves in that specific deck. So the first tip that I have is something that might sound a little dumb at first, but trust me on this one. The first tip I have is to play cards that you enjoy. Play with cards you enjoy, because anyone can just copy the top tier meta lists or whatever, but just because it's a good deck and the cards are good, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy playing that deck. And if you don't enjoy playing that deck, you're not going to have fun. You're not going to be ranking up as much as you probably should be. You're probably going to get tilted a little bit because you're getting, you're making mistakes, so you're going to be ranking down. My first tip is just really play with cards that you enjoy. So that doesn't necessarily mean to try out a new deck, try out some new cards, and just toss it away like after the first game because you didn't like it. You really need to give it a few tries. I would say when you play a deck, I usually like to test it out at least a few games. I don't know, I would say at least 5, maybe even more, because the games in Marvel Snap are so short. But don't just play a deck for one game and then let's say you lose that game, you're like, oh, this deck sucks. I'm going to swap off to something else. So the next thing I want to talk about is a couple different ways that you can build decks. So I think there's a few different methods here, and I want to go over each of them and actually build decks from scratch with you guys here, and build decks that I would actually be confident into queuing into ranked. Right now I'm ranked 69, almost at infinite. I would be confident queuing into these decks with. So let's go ahead and hop into the deck builder here and let's build a new deck. So the first method, and probably the most common method for building decks, is you unlock a new card, right? Let's say you unlock a new card from a collector's reserve, or you're saving up tokens for something in the token shop. You unlock a new card, you want to play with it. You're like, okay, how can I build a deck around this card? So let's bring up an example of that, right? So recently I unlocked Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel is a 5 energy card for 6 power. At the end of the game, move to a location that wins you the game if possible. So Captain Marvel is a pretty good card. So the first thing I want to think about is, okay, what synergizes with Captain Marvel? At the end of the game, move to a location that wins you the game if possible. So Captain Marvel is good into getting into hard to reach locations. So let's say Sanctum Sanctorum, Death's Domain, what else is there? Boromir, Altar of Death, like just really locations that are kind of tricky to play cards into. Maybe Luke's Bar as well. So immediately there, I start to think, right? Okay, what synergizes with Captain Marvel? She wants to move into a location that's hard to reach. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Storm. So Storm is going to flood a location. Next turn's the last turn cards can be played here. So, okay, Storm works well with Captain Marvel. Okay, and now I start to think what synergizes with Storm. Okay, well now a tried and true classic combo you probably heard of or seen it already. Jessica Jones. You play Jessica Jones onto the flooding lane. Last turn cards can be played there, and Jessica Jones is just easily going to be 8 power for 4 energy, which is just really good value. So okay, now we already got 3 cards in our deck that synergize pretty well together. So now I'm starting to get into thinking, what do I want to make this deck be, right? We want this deck to be maybe like some sort of location control lockdown list. So you kind of got to start thinking, okay, what kind of archetype do I want to slot in here too? So with these cards, I'm starting to think, okay, what's another card that can maybe fit into the Flooded Storm lane? And I gravitate towards, or is he, Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is really good for Storm as well and other tricky locations. On reveal, add a 5 power Doombot to each other location. So Doctor Doom is a really good card to slot into tricky locations. And now I'm trying to think, okay, what other cards can we fit into that Storm lane? Another one that comes into mind is Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is just an all-around good 1-cost card. You can move this once. Just a really good card. Okay, now we got a few cards in our deck. We got 5 cards in our deck. So what else synergizes with these cards? Well, one that often goes with Nightcrawler pretty reasonably is Angela. Angela, even though she did get nerfed from 1 power to 0, she's still a really good card. When you play a card here, plus 2 power, you play Angela, you play Nightcrawler on top of the Angela, and then you want to move that Nightcrawler to keep playing cards into Angela and to keep buffing her. So that is a really good card to go with Nightcrawler, right? And Angela is just a good card to go in any deck, really. So if we have Nightcrawler and if we have Angela, we might not always want to play Nightcrawler on turn 1. We might want to hold him later on until we have our Angela. So let's get another card that we want to play on turn 1. Another one that's always good is Iceman, but I think in this situation, I think I'm actually going to pick Sunspot. Sunspot is a really good 1-cost card, and the reason I'm picking Sunspot over Iceman is you can put him in a lane, you can lock down that location with Storm, and Sunspot will still be able to grow even though you lock down that location, right? So that's why I'm picking Sunspot over Iceman. And then now we have a couple 1-cost cards in our deck. Well, maybe I don't want my Sunspot or my Nightcrawler to get killed by Killmonger. And I'm going to throw in Armor. Armor is a good card for protecting your 1-cost cards. It's really good at countering destroy decks. Also really good at dealing with those annoying locations like Death's Domain, Danger Room, things like that. So Armor is just an all-around good card to throw in here. So looking at this deck, now we have 8 cards. We started with just Captain Marvel. And we really kind of started building onto it, right? You really got to get into the flow of what cards synergize well with each other. So that's kind of my thought process here. So now looking at this, I like to also look at how many cards I have in each energy slot, right? So we have 2 1-cost cards, which I think is fine. That's probably okay. We can probably leave it at that. We have 2 2-cost cards. That's okay. Maybe we can add one more. Maybe Storm, 1 3-cost. Jessica Jones, 1 4-cost. 1 5-cost. 1 6-cost. So I think we're okay on the 1-costs. I want to add more other cards in 2 and above, just to kind of spread out the energy a little bit. So what are some other cards that can synergize well with these cards? Well, another one that we can do instead of Doctor Doom is actually we could do something like Magneto. Magneto is a really powerful card. He's 6 energy, 12 power, and he's going to move all opposing 3 and 4 cost cards to this location. So let's say you storm a lane and it's flooded, you can't play cards there, and maybe things didn't go your way. Maybe you didn't draw your combo pieces like Sunspot, Jessica Jones, things like that. So maybe you're actually losing that storm lane. You can use Magneto to pull cards out of that lane and actually win that lane. And I like it as an alternate finisher to Doctor Doom, because Doctor Doom spreads himself wide, and what I mean by that is he puts power on the board across multiple lanes, and Magneto goes tall. And what going tall means, if you're not familiar with that term, is just placing a lot of power in one location. So that's why it's good to have options. It's good to have options, right, for our finishers. So that's why I like Magneto in this list as well. So we have 3 more slots in this deck list. So what else is good at locking out our opponent of locations? Well, another one that comes to mind is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a 4-cost card. On reveal, your opponent can't play cards at this location next turn. So usually you want to play him on turn 5. Playing him on turn 4 is okay sometimes, but ideally you'd like to play him on turn 5 because you know your opponent can't play cards there for the last turn, turn 6. So let's go ahead and throw Spider-Man in there. And then now I see, well, I have Spider-Man. I have Jessica Jones. That's 2 4-cost cards. I could probably throw in Zabu and another 4-cost card. Zabu is the most recent season pass card. Ongoing or 4-cost cards cost 2 less. So let's go ahead and throw in Zabu. And to take advantage of Zabu, we want to throw in 1 more 4-cost card. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. We're like, okay, now we need 1 more 4-cost card. What can we throw in here that synergizes with the rest of our deck? Now, I'm a big fan of Sandman. I don't know if I'd exactly put Sandman in this list. Maybe it could work. One of the things with deck building is you really got to test it out multiple times, see what cards work for you, see what cards don't. Shang-Chi is always a good tech card to throw in, but it could be a little bit awkward since we do have armor in this deck. Enchantress is a good one as well, but again, could be awkward since we have armor and Zabu, which are both ongoing cards. Drax is a decent one, actually. Drax actually might be good in this list because he got recently buffed. Drax is 4-cost, 5 power now. And on reveal, if your opponent play a card here this turn, plus 3 power. So Drax is going to go to 8 power. But the thing is, if you whiff with Drax, if you miss, he's still going to be a 4-5, which is decent with Zabu. And I think Drax actually fits really well in this list because we're locking down locations with Storm and with Spider-Man, so it's going to be easier to predict where our opponent is going to play their cards, right? Now, another consideration since we're throwing Drax in here is maybe we want to add Daredevil to guarantee we know where our opponent's playing their cards on turn 5. But as of right now, this list looks pretty solid, to be honest. I would be totally okay with queuing into this with ranked right now at rank 96. I would be totally comfortable queuing into ranked with this deck. So that is the deck list. And the thing is with deck building, you need to test them a lot. That's a big thing, is testing the decks out, because some cards might not be performing as well as you thought they might be, and it's worth swapping them out for something else. Like I said, you might want to put in Daredevil in here. Maybe you could take out Armor or Angela for Daredevil. That could work. If you take out one of your 4-cost cards, you're probably going to want to take out Zabu, since he's not going to get as much value here. Let's say I post this deck on YouTube, right? I say, guys, this deck got me to rank 200 Infinite. This has a 200% win rate. You're not going to lose with this deck. But you're like, but J-Hugs, I don't have Captain Marvel. What can I replace her with? That's another question that, you know, people get asked a lot, is what can I replace this card with? Something you need to understand is, what is this card's purpose? And this card's purpose, Captain Marvel specifically for this example, is she's going to move to a location that wins you the game. So she's going to move into those hard to reach locations. So what's a good replacement for her? It's going to be Vision. And most of you should have Vision if you already completed Series 2. I believe he's a Series 2 card. So Vision is 1 more power than Captain Marvel. And he might actually be better than Captain Marvel in some scenarios, since you can actually move Vision manually, whereas Captain Marvel is going to move herself. So Vision would be a good replacement for Captain Marvel. Now, another example would be like, okay, J-Hugs, well, what if I don't have Magneto? Well, you got to think, what is Magneto's purpose? So his purpose is 2 different things. One is he is an alternate finisher of Doctor Doom. Like I said previously, Doctor Doom is a finisher that goes wide, spread his power across the board, across all 3 locations, right? And Magneto is a finisher that goes tall, so he is a big body on the board on one location. But his second purpose is he has a disruptive element to him by pulling 3 and 4 cost cards to his location, so messing with your opponent's plays. So there's a couple different ways you can go about this. You can say, okay, well, I want just a big body on the board. Well, you can just go with Hulk. Hulk is honestly not bad. He's 6 energy, 12 power, same as Magneto. He just doesn't have the on reveal ability. So if you're looking for another big body to put on the board, you put Hulk. But if you want to go ahead and replace that disruptive element of Magneto, then you could go for something like Arrow. Arrow is 5 cost, but she has an on reveal ability, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. So there is a couple different ways that you can look at it, right? There's never going to be a one-to-one replacement for every card in Marvel Snap because every card is unique, and that's what I love about this game. But there are some cards that you can replace and make this deck your own if you don't have the cards in this deck. Now, the next method of deck building I want to look at is building a deck around a specific archetype, right? So if you go to the filter here in the deck builder, it actually lists common abilities within Marvel Snap. You have on reveal, ongoing, no ability, discard, move, and destroy. So let's say we want to build a no ability deck, essentially a Patriot deck, right? Okay, so let's say we want to build a deck around a specific archetype. So then, well, the first thing that we need, of course, is going to be Patriot. And Patriot is right here. Ongoing ability, cards with no abilities have +2 power. So now this is a little bit tricky because there's so many different ways you can take Patriot, right? You can take Patriot in a Silver Surfer route. You can have a Patriot Silver Surfer hybrid deck. You can do Patriot with Ultron. Ultron is a really fun card to slot into Patriot. Maybe you don't have Ultron. You can do Patriot with Doctor Doom because the Doom bots have no power, and Doctor Doom is another good card as well. Or let's say you don't have either of those cards. Maybe you don't have Doctor Doom, you don't have Ultron. Let's go ahead and throw an Onslaught. Onslaught is going to double your ongoing effects at this location, so it can actually double the effect of your Patriot. For all my budget gamers out there who are still in series, maybe like early series 3, let's say you have Patriot, and let's assume you don't have Doctor Doom. Let's assume you don't have Ultron, and let's assume you don't have Silver Surfer. So let's go ahead and do like a budget Patriot deck. So we don't have Doctor Doom, we don't have Ultron, so let's go ahead and put in Onslaught, right? He's going to double our ongoing effects at this location. So he's going to double the effect of Patriot. Now the thing is, you need Onslaught and Patriot in the same lane for Onslaught for his ability to work, right? Now that becomes very susceptible to Enchantress and Rogue. So what do we do to counter that? Well, you got your good old boy Cosmo. Where is Cosmo? Cosmo is going to prevent you from getting hit with Enchantress or Rogue. So I really like Cosmo in this list for that reason. So now we have Patriot, we have Cosmo, and we have Onslaught. So what else do we need? Well, we need no ability cards, right? So some good no ability cards. Wasp is a good one I throw into pretty much all of my Patriot decks. For this example deck, I'm going to do a straight up budget Patriot deck. We're going to do a budget Patriot build with just Patriot as the only Series 3 card. Everything else Series 1 and below. Or Series 2 and below, my bad. So let's assume we don't have Wasp, right? Squirrel Girl is a good option because she's going to add a 1 power squirrel to each other location. Squirrels have no ability. The squirrels are going to go to 3 power, potentially 5 with Onslaught. So Squirrel Girl is really good. Misty Knight. Misty Knight is a card that everybody has in this game. And you're thinking, wow, this card is absolutely trash. Why does this card exist? Well, once you unlock Patriot, this card's looking pretty good. It's a 1/4 essentially. So let's go ahead and throw Misty Knight in there. Another good one is Shocker. Shocker is a 2/3, no ability, goes to 2/5 with Patriot. Let's throw him in there. Another one we have is Mr. Sinister. He's going to add a Sinister clone to this location with the same power. So Mr. Sinister does not receive the buff himself, but his Sinister clone receives the buff from Patriot because he has no ability. We also have Cyclops, another no ability card. Throw him in there. The Thing, another no ability card. Throw him in there. And then we also have Abomination, throw him in there. We have the Hulk, again, just tossing no ability cards. And this is just a complete budget Patriot build, but it's still effective, right? So Hulk is another alternate finisher instead of Onslaught. So we really, Patriot's a pretty easy deck to build, to be honest. You really just throw in Patriot and a bunch of no ability cards. So this is a pretty easy example, but we need one more slot in this deck list. So what can we put in here? Well, we have a couple of different options. So I like to look at my energy curve here, but what I mean by that is how many cards I have at each energy slot. So we have 2 1 costs. I think that's fine. If we put any more, we're probably going to get shredded by Killmonger. We have 2 2 costs. Again, that's probably fine. 3 3 costs is good. 1 4 cost, 1 5 cost, and 2 6 costs. So I probably want to add either another 4 cost or another 5 cost, right? Just to even out our energy curve a little bit. So let's go ahead and let's filter for the 4 and 5 cost cards. We have a few different options here. Again, Shang-Chi is always a good tech card to throw into any deck, really. Kazar is more better in like an Ultron style Patriot, since the only 1 cost cards we have are Misty Knight and Squirrel Girl and the Squirrels. So not too great. White Queen is a decent card, but she doesn't really have any synergy with this deck. And then 5 cost cards. I think the best option here would actually be Blue Marvel. Because one, we put a lot of bodies on the board, right? Squirrel Girl is going to spawn 2 squirrels. Mr. Sinister is going to spawn a Sinister clone. So we tend to put a lot of bodies on the board, but he also has an ongoing ability. So this is another ongoing ability that could be stacked on top of Onslaught. So if you have Patriot, Onslaught, Blue Marvel in a lane, that's just so much points on the board. But if you're doing that, I would highly recommend you put Cosmo in that same lane so you don't get hit with Enchantress or Rogue. But yeah, if you have Cosmo, Patriot, Blue Marvel, Onslaught all in the same lane, I mean, you're probably just gonna win that game, to be honest. So this is a budget Patriot deck. It has a really solid energy curve. I really like this. If I was someone who just unlocked Patriot, no other Series 3 cards, you know, this is a deck I would probably want to play. So this is building around a specific archetype. I think this is a little bit easier instead of building around just 1 card, because sometimes you get 1 card, you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this, right? But yeah, Patriot is a pretty easy deck to build around. Okay, now the next deck building method I want to go over is a little bit more advanced. So we talked about building a deck around 1 card. We talked around building a common ability, and common ability being one of these cards, or one of these abilities here. Now let's talk about building a deck around an uncommon ability, right? So an uncommon archetype, not necessarily uncommon archetype, but an archetype that might not seem so obvious as like Patriot, On Reveal, Ongoing. You know, all those cards have very specific like payoff finishers, you know, like On Reveal, like you have Odin as a finisher. Ongoing, you have Spectrum. So those decks are pretty easy to build. But let's talk about something a little bit more advanced. One of my favorite cards in Marvel Snap is actually Zero. So Zero is a very unique card in this game. He is a 1/3 on reveal. Remove the abilities on the next card you play. So let's say you're grinding through Series 3, you just unlock this card, and you're thinking, on reveal, remove the abilities on the next card you play? Well, that sounds like trash. What the hell do you do with this card, right? So let's go ahead and build a deck around him. And again, I think for the purpose of this example, we're going to do a budget Zero deck. So meaning no other Series 3 or 5 cards other than Zero himself. So let's go ahead and build a deck around Zero, right? This is a little bit more difficult than, let's say, Patriot deck. Patriot's pretty easy. Just throw in a bunch of no ability cards in there. So let's say we got Zero, and immediately my mind starts thinking, okay, remove the abilities on the next card you play. So what are some cards that have negative abilities? Well, one of them that is really good, one of the strongest, well, actually the strongest 1-cost card in the game, literally, is Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw is a 1/7 with a negative effect with you can't play this after turn 3 and you can't play cards here at his location. So we're going to throw him in the deck, right? He's a really good 0 target for us because we don't want to play, or we can't play cards in his location. So Ebony Maw is a good card to pair with 0. Now, the thing with Ebony Maw is he is such high power, we don't want him getting killed by Killmonger, right? So when I usually run Ebony Maw, I usually run Armor to protect Ebony Maw, and Armor also protects our 0. 1-3 is a pretty good stat line as well. So Armor protecting Ebony Maw is good, but it also protects our 0. So now you start to think, okay, what other cards have negative effects in this game that are Series 2 or below? Another one is Lizard. Lizard is one of the best 2-cost cards in the game. He's a 2/5, but he has a negative effect. Ongoing, -3 power if your opponent has 4 cards here. So Lizard is another negative effect card that you can use 0 on. So another really good card to fit in any deck, really, but I really like him with the 0 decks. So now you're thinking, okay, well, what if we don't draw 0, right? So how do we deal with the negative effects of Ebony Maw and Lizard? Well, for Lizard, that's a little bit easier. We could just throw in Enchantress, remove the abilities from all ongoing cards at this location. So we can play Enchantress on top of our Lizard to deactivate his negative effect if we don't draw our 0. That could be a little bit awkward sometimes with Armor, but just try and play your cards in a way to where, you know, you don't play your Enchantress and Armor in the same lane. But you don't have to run Enchantress in this deck, but I think it does pair well with the Lizard, and it is just a pretty good tech card against Zabu and things like that. There's a lot of Zabu in the meta right now, right? So that's something you also have to take into account is the current meta. So other good cards to pair with 0 are Atuma, Typhoid Mary, but for this deck example, I'm not going to throw them in since they're Series 3, Series 4. So what other cards could go well into this deck list? Well, I think one that's good to throw into any deck, but I think this deck specifically, where you want to be drawing 0 before turn 6, right, is America Chavez. America Chavez is just a really good card for thinning your deck. You always draw this card on turn 6 and not before. So America Chavez increases the odds of us drawing our 0 before turn 6, which is very nice. So I think America Chavez is really good in this list. Now, I'm trying to think, okay, so let's say we got Ebony Maw in our hand, right? And let's say we play him with his negative effect, and we didn't get 0. We didn't 0 him out, right? So let's say we have Ebony Maw on a lane by himself. We can't play any cards into his lane, so how can we get power into his location? Well, there's a couple different ways we can do that. One card I think is actually a little bit underrated is Claw. Claw is a 5/4 ongoing. The location to the right has +6 power. As long as you play Ebony Maw in the middle lane or the right lane, you just play Claw to the left of him, and he'll put 6 power into that lane. So 6 power on top of Ebony Maw's 7 is 13 power. 13 power is a lot for just one card there. That is a lot of power. And then, well, at that point, you got to make a decision, right? You're like, well, Claw and Enchantress kind of have anti-synergy with each other, so we got to make a decision here. So I think actually we want to take out Claw then, and we can actually put in Vision instead. So Vision is 7 power. You can move him each turn. You can move him into the Ebony Maw lane, and it's actually 1 more point than Claw's 6 power into the lane. So Vision is a good addition, but Claw's also good. If you take out Claw, you probably want to take out Enchantress. That's why you kind of got to experiment with the deck, right? So what are some other ways we can get power into Ebony Maw's lane? Another way would be with Mr. Fantastic, but again, you got to kind of take into account the Enchantress. If you put in Mr. Fantastic, I would probably take out Enchantress. Another way we can put power into Ebony Maw's lane is with Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler can just move into any location, plus we have armor to protect him, so that is good as well. Okay, so now we have 8 cards in this deck. This is where I stop and I take a look at the energy curve. We have 3 1-cost cards, which that's good enough. I really wouldn't add any more than 3. After that, it starts becoming a zoo deck, and that's a whole nother type of deck, right? We got 1 2-cost, actually 2 2-cost, 1 4-cost, 1 5-cost, 1 6-cost. So I probably want to start adding 3-cost cards into here. All right, so taking a look at the 3-cost cards, what else can we throw in here, right? So another option, let's assume we don't have Maximus, because Maximus is a really good card in Zero decks or Silver Surfer decks, just a lot of decks in general. Maximus is a really good card. Let's assume we don't have him, right? We're going to throw in Swordmaster. Swordmaster is a 3/6. On reveal, discard a card from your hand. Now, we can just cancel that ability with 0, or we can play him on turn 6 and just not have that negative downside effect, because we're not playing a discard deck, we're playing a 0 deck, right? So Swordmaster is another option to cancel out his negative effect. So what else can we do to cancel out Swordmaster's negative effect? Well, Cosmo is another way to cancel that effect, right? You could play Cosmo on one lane, then you could play Swordmaster on top of that lane, and then he's not going to discard a card from your hand, which is really nice for us, right? So now we got 1 cost, we got 2 costs, we got 3 costs. So I probably want to start looking at probably 4s and 5s here. I think America Chavez as our only 6 is fine. I'm assuming we don't have Series 3 cards, so we can't throw in like Doctor Doom, we can't throw in Magneto, things like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 4 and 5 cost options. So looking at our other options here, I think another one that could actually work pretty decently would actually be White Tiger, since it's going to add a 7-power Tiger to another location. So you could potentially slot a Tiger into that Ebony Maw lane if he's not zeroed out for an additional 7 power there, which is very, very good, and good to get into any other tricky locations as well. And something I thought about, I was looking at other 4-cost cards that we could put into this deck. I think, again, Shang-Chi is always a good tech option to throw into any deck, essentially, but it could be a little bit awkward since we have Cosmo and Armor, which kind of conflict with Shang-Chi. So I think what actually could be a little bit of a spicy pick, this could be a little bit spicy, is Heimdall, right? This is where you kind of start to think outside of the box with deck building. So Heimdall is really mostly played in movement decks, right? He's going to move your other cards 1 location to the left. So he buffs up cards like Multiple Man, Human Torch, Dagger, things like that. But I think Heimdall could actually be a little bit of a sneaky play here, right? Just moving your cards to the left, and in combination with the Vision, you can just move Vision to wherever you want while moving your other cards to the left. I think it could be decent. It could be a little sneaky play. Plus, let's say you don't zero out your Lizard. Maybe you move your Lizard from a location that had 4 cards. He went to 2 power. Maybe you move him to the left, and now he's in a location where there's not 4 cards, and he goes back to 5 power. So I think Heimdall could actually be a bit of a spicy pick in here, right? This is where you start to get kind of creative with deck building and a little bit more advanced. Heimdall, maybe, you know, there's a certain situation where he's a really bad play on turn 6. Maybe there's Fisk Tower. Fisk Tower, if you don't know, when a card moves here, it gets destroyed. So let's say Fisk Tower is in the middle or left location. Well, you don't want to play Heimdall. You don't want your cards to get destroyed. Well, you draw Chavez on turn 6 every time. So you have a reliable turn 6 play with Chavez. So I think this is actually a decent 0 budget deck. Like, if you have 0 and no other Series 3 cards to combine with 0, I think this could actually be a pretty decent deck, and honestly catch people off guard, which is one of the more important things in Marvel Snap, is catching people off guard, right? Because you want to surprise people and win those 8 cube games or those 4 cube games instead of trying to just get 1 or 2 cubes at a time. But that's a whole nother discussion for another video. Okay, and the last deck building method I want to talk about is building around hot and featured locations in Marvel Snap. So if you're not aware, hot locations are locations that will appear in 60% of your matches once a week in Marvel Snap for 24 hours, and featured locations will appear in 40% of your matches for 48 hours. Too long, in my opinion. That's another little side rant. I think featured locations should be 24 hours. But anyways, let's build a deck around a hot location. And actually, at the time of recording this video, the hot location for today is going to be Savage Land. Savage Land is, well, I guess that actually fits the theme of the season pass, right? It's going to add 2 raptors on each side of this location. So we got to start thinking up of ways that we can interact with this location, right? There's a few different ideas that come to mind. One is these raptors have no ability, so they could go well with Patriot decks, right? And the Raptors are also one cost, so they pair with Zabu. So that is another way of looking at it. And a third way would be to destroy those Raptors with Carnage, because two one cost 1 point Raptors on one location, that's taking up a good amount of space on that location, right? And you don't want to clog that location too early, or you're going to get locked out of there. So Carnage is a good way to eat those cards and destroy those cards. So that is an interesting way to approach it as well. There's also Killmonger, who destroys all the one cost cards. So if your opponent is playing either a Patriot deck or a Zoo deck, I think that would actually be a good counter to that. So let's go the destroy route with here, right? I think the Zoo route, Khazar route, might be the weakest, just because Killmonger exists, right? Killmonger is just such an insane tech card against a Zoo decks. Patriot is good as well, but I mean, the Raptors just kind of take up space. Like, if you're playing Ultron, the Raptors just kind of take up space, right? So let's go to the destroy route for this featured location, or hot location, Savage Lands. So we're going to put in Killmonger. If people are playing Zoo decks or Patriot decks, they're just going to get absolutely punished by Killmonger. Then what else did we want to do? We want to do Carnage, right? To eat those Raptors. And the Raptors are only 1 power. Carnage is going to get +2 power from each of those Raptors. So it's actually a net positive for Carnage. Okay, we got 2 destroy cards in this deck, right? So let's go ahead and go to the destroy common abilities. Well, Nova's just kind of an obvious one to throw in there with Killmonger to buff all your cards. Bucky Barnes is a good one to destroy with Carnage. Other good ones could be Deathblock as well. Now, there's also Wolverine and Sabretooth. Those are a little bit weaker cards, in my opinion. I like having Shang-Chi. Even though he's not destroying your cards, he's destroying your opponent's cards. I think he is a good tech option. So I think we're kind of going in a little bit more like destroy control here. We got 6 cards in our deck. We're already halfway done. So I think we want to go with a little bit more control style option here. So let's go ahead and take a look at what other control options we can have in this deck list. Well, so far we just have a bunch of on reveal cards. We got no ongoing cards in our deck. So then I think Enchantress would make sense, right? Some people might try and play Khazar or Patriot, like I said. So I think Enchantress is a good option in this deck list. Rogue could be a good option as well, but I think I actually like Enchantress better in this style of deck. Now, what else could we do here? Well, we have 2 4-cost cards. We could potentially throw Zabu in there for our 4-cost cards to cost 2 less. That is also a good option as well. Now, what are some other cards that could be destroyed that we don't mind getting destroyed, right? The Hood is a good one since he's -2 power. We can destroy him with Carnage, Killmonger, or Deathlock, and we'll get a 6-power demon in our hand, which is very nice. Now, I think I'm actually not going to go the Zabu route with this deck. You could, but it could be a little weird to have Zabu and Enchantress in the same deck. You don't really want to Enchantress your own Zabu, so I think for that reason, we're not going to put Zabu in this deck. Now, we got 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. So actually a pretty even energy curve right now. So we should probably go ahead and look at 5 and 6s, right? So what are some other cards that could potentially go well with the Savage Land? Well, something I think that could be a little bit spicy is we do Hobgoblin, right? And you're thinking Hobgoblin, why Hobgoblin? That's a little bit weird. Well, we can do Hobgoblin in conjunction with Daredevil. We can see what our opponent's going to play on turn 5. We can play Hobgoblin into that Savage Land location and potentially clog that board for our opponent. Now, I know we might destroy the Raptors with Killmonger, but maybe we don't have Killmonger. Maybe we throw Hobgoblin in there and we just clog that location for them. So yeah, we have different options here, but also Hobgoblin paired with Daredevil is just a really good combination. So we have that combo, which is nice. Now, I think another option that could be a little sneaky, a little sneaky, is actually, where is she? Is actually Viper. So Viper with the Hood is not necessarily anything new. That's a combo that's been around for a while. You play the Hood, you play Viper to give your opponent the Hood, but you can also give your opponent a Raptor, right? Again, kind of clogging up their board a little bit. So I think that is another good option here. And then we have one more slot to fill in this deck list. Now, we don't have any 6-cost cards. Again, you could throw in America Chavez. I like America Chavez. Some people don't. You could throw her into any deck list. I think she'll be fine. You could throw in Magneto. You could throw in Doctor Doom is another good one. Doctor Doom, can't really go wrong with him either. But since we're actually playing Daredevil, I think a good one could also be Gamora, right? Because on reveal, if your opponent played a card here this turn, +5 power, so Gamora will go to 12 power. And with the Daredevil, you can correctly predict where your opponent is going to play their cards on turn 5. So very easy to activate her on reveal ability. Now, we have Hobgoblin and Gamora, so really, you know, with Daredevil, if we have him on the board, we can see what they're going to play, and we want to make the better decision on which one's better to play. Sometimes Gamora might be the better play, sometimes Hobgoblin might be the better play. So I think this is a pretty decent kind of a deck tech to kind of, I guess, counter the Savage Lands or take advantage of it, right? So that's kind of where my thought process came of with the Savage Lands. Like I said, there's a couple different routes with you could go with it, with the Zoo and the Patriot route, but we're aiming to counter that, right? Because we have Killmonger and Enchantress. So I think this is actually a pretty decent deck for the Savage Lands. Maybe I'll actually run this myself. Maybe I'll make a couple changes. Again, this deck might not be perfect. Deck testing takes a lot of time, and you really got to understand the meta, kind of understand what kind of cards you're running into a lot, and adjust from there. So hopefully you learned something from this video. Those are my different methods of deck building within Marvel Snap, and I could just talk about deck building all day. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being after I upload it, but probably going to be pretty long. I talked a lot, I'm sorry, but hopefully you learned something. And there's probably still stuff that even you can learn from deck building that I didn't mention. And I'm sure there's even more things that I can learn myself as a deck builder. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of January. I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Oh, and if you haven't joined the Discord, go ahead and join the Discord. I'd love to see you there and talk Marvel Snap with you. The link for it will be in the description down below. So once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.